job.
There's a very big problem. On the one hand, you want to support people who are in distress. On the other hand, you want to relocate them. And getting that balance right is the sort of problem which requires very sophisticated economic management. And perhaps when we come back in a year, I'll tell you how well they've done.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to be fair to the government, it's having to make decisions on the hoof because we haven't had to deal with something like this before.
I think that's right, and I think one problem is that quite lots of the government have been run down over the last 10 years, and they really don't have very often the skills that are required. For instance, we have no Department of Labour, so we have no specialists now in the whole area of how the labour market works, how unemployment works, how migration interacts with the labour market.
So, Brian, again, as you say, if we're paying attention, we don't know what's going on. But I'm going to ask you, when do you think, so we've got the government will come out with the current state of the books, how much we've overspent in August. What about maybe getting more of a sense in terms of the economic impact, in terms of unemployment and also GDP? Because both those things we don't really know yet. The figures we've got so far it's just from the start of the lockdown, isn't it?
From memory, the GDP figure comes out about November. We will have the recorded unemployment figures, and they will come out every month, but they will be difficult to interpret, partly because this is such an unusual situation that we're using data prepared for one purpose.
All right, everybody, good evening. Right, where to begin? Obviously, there is an investigation underway at the moment. That investigation is going to continue. And so in my comments tonight, I want to be clear that I'm not... I want to be careful not to prejudice the investigation at all. It's important that all of the questions that have been raised about this are answered thoroughly, including who had access to the information, why they had access to the information, whether the information was handled appropriately at all times. And it's important that Michael Heron has the opportunity to complete that investigation, so he will do that. Obviously, there have been further comments in the media late this afternoon about how this information came to be in the media. Like all New Zealanders, I'm very disappointed at the revelations that there are politicians involved in this. I think it is incumbent on all of us to do the right thing when we receive information like that, which is sensitive, which does record people's personal and private information, and to not release that publicly or to the media. And I'm disappointed that that hasn't happened in this instance.
In your view, would Michelle Boak have had access to that information in her role as the Auckland Sea Helicopter Trail?
Look, that is one of the things that the investigation will look at.
Should Hamish Walker stand down from standing in the lead table?
Look, that's a matter for the National Party.
But in your mind, do you think an MP deserves to stand for Parliament when they're doing that?
Look, I'm not going to comment on another political party's internal issues. That's a matter for them.
You would have to find out that it was Hamish Walker that led the list to the
About 5:30 when I read it on the news.
What was your reaction?
Look, I was disappointed because I think sometimes members of Parliament are given information inappropriately. That does happen from time to time, and I think New Zealanders do have to rely on the judgment of members of Parliament to do the right thing where that happens, and clearly that hasn't happened in this particular case.
Other agencies, though, that would come under scrutiny because they would have access to that information. So can you rule in or out that Michelle Boak would have been privy to that information in that role?
Look, again, that's one of the things that the investigation will look at, but I do want to say that that particular organisation is a trusted partner. They will have access to people's confidential health information because of the nature of the work that they do, and all New Zealanders are entitled to know that any information about them that organisation has will be treated with the utmost of confidence and with their privacy being respected.
You've mentioned criminality in connection with this. Specifically, which act would you see as applying that would apply criminal censure?
Look, there is now an investigation underway. Obviously, that's being headed by Michael Heron. He has the ability to require all of the information and to get all of the information that he will need. And before I make any further comment on what subsequent action might follow, I think it's important that that investigation runs its course.
But could that go beyond the Privacy Act? I mean, are you talking about another piece of legislation that could be used, like the Crimes Act?
Look, I imagine that the investigation will canvass all of the relevant issues, and I don't want to prejudice that.
But what act were you referring to when you said that?
Well, look, there's a number. I mean, the Privacy Act obviously is one of the acts which I think may be in play here. I'm not going to make any further judgment on that, though, until the investigation's completed its full course.
Do you think the media organisations that were linked to this data acted responsibly?
Yes, I do, and I do want to again thank the media for the fact that they received what should be personal and confidential information about people. They've not published it. I do think that it's a legitimate thing for the media to publish and report on the fact that they were given the information, and I want to thank the media for the way they've handled that information, though. I think that the journalists who have it have clearly been responsible in the way that they have used it.
When you spoke tonight, when you saw that news kind of came at about 5:30, what was your first reaction?
Look, I guess on one level, pleased that there is more information coming out about how that made it into the public domain, because potentially it might speed up the investigation. I want to get to the bottom of this as quickly as possible, so that if there are any weaknesses in the system, that they can be rectified as quickly as possible. And so I would say to anybody who has information that might help that investigation speed along more quickly, please come forward, give that information to Michael Heron so that he can get that job done, and then we can all get on with things and have confidence that...
Your first gut reaction to Hamish Walker and Michelle Ho linking this was pleased?
I was pleased that further information was coming to light. Obviously, I was disappointed that any politicians, regardless of which party they come from, would use people's personal information in that way.
What do you think about motivation?
What was that?
What do you think was the motivation?
Look, that's really a question for them.
But in opposition,
So back to me.
Is worried that these events will undermine public trust in the system. What is your response to that?
Well, I think as soon as I became aware of this on Friday, I immediately took action to make sure that an investigation was launched or triggered, and that was formally launched yesterday, because I think it is really important that New Zealanders have confidence that any private information that any part of government or the health system stores is being stored in a way that respects their privacy, and clearly there are some concerns that have legitimately been raised here. We've got to get to the bottom of that, and that's why this investigation is important, and it's one of the reasons why the investigation should continue, so that we can get to the bottom of exactly what happened, and then make sure that the relevant systems are in place.
Is the government picking up the tab for this investigation?
Yes.
Have you spoken with Michael Heron tonight, and do you have any understanding of what elements of the investigation are still left now that a large component has been answered?
No, I've not spoken to Michael Heron at all. It's important that he conducts his investigation thoroughly and independently. His reporting relationship is through the State Services Commissioner, and he will be utilising the powers of the State Services Commissioner in conducting the investigation. And it's very important that I'm not involved in that process, and that he will make all of the relevant judgments on his own. Well, again, that's a matter for him. Obviously, I want the investigation to be completed as soon as possible, and I've made that clear to the State Services Commissioner, who, of course, will have passed that on to Michael Heron.
At the meeting itself, Hamish Walker said the information that I received was not password protected by the government. It was not stored on a secure system that authorised people then to log on. There was no redaction for shared patient details and no confidentiality statement on the document. Is that a mistake?
Well, I think if a Member of Parliament can't accept that receiving people's health information is something that they should treat with a degree of confidence, then that says quite a lot about their own levels of personal integrity and judgment.
Well, the opposition parliament, though, has admitted to knowingly engineering a privacy breach to embarrass your government. Is the opposition going too far?
Look, I think all members of Parliament should act with care when it comes to handling this sort of information if they are given it, regardless of how they are given it.
But Mr. Muller has used that information with him to attack your government over the weekend. Should he retract that?
Well, look, I think perhaps he might want to reflect on the comments that he made and consider whether or not he applies those to his own members of Parliament as well. Look, I think when it comes to people's personal and confidential information, I think that there have got to be some lines in the sand here. That's very old ground, and my involvement in that was somewhat unintentional, as I think we canvassed very well at the time.
While the investigation was still ongoing, will you be taking one of the areas where the government is confident that it looks like that information probably went maybe a bit further than it should have done.
Look, again, I think that's one of the things the investigation will look at. They'll look at all the relevant systems. And of course, I imagine my expectation to all of the agencies involved is very clear, that even before the investigation is completed, they should be looking pretty closely at how they're handling personal information, so that if they can identify improvements to that process that can be made before the investigation has reported back, they should do that.
So in terms of your own response, will you be picking up the phone and saying, hey, look, make sure that this doesn't go very far as an interim step?
Oh, look, I have already made it very clear that if there are immediate improvements to their information handling that they can put in place now, then they should do that. Look, I think that this is a very disappointing situation. It does have a ring of dirty politics to it, and I think that that would be very sad for the forthcoming election campaign. All right, thanks everybody.